Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Going to do another Mindgasms podcast today with Bello and Adam Hansen. We're both back to talk about big, important topics like wisdom, ego, humility, confidence, and suicide. And maybe a little about how all of those are sort of related. So, um, why don't you guys start off by introducing yourselves to those people who don't know you?
Alex, I defer to you.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Alex Bello. I've been on a couple of times. I'm a coder and just a general podcast enthusiast. Yeah, that's it.
Great.
Awesome.
I'm Adam Hansen, and I'm an innovation dude working with Ideas to Go, author of the book Outsmart Your Instincts, which explores this field called behavioral innovation, which is the intersection of behavioral science and innovation, which seemed kind of an obvious thing to get after. I would say beyond that, my primary identity would be husband, father, grandfather, and seeker without portfolio.
That's a lot of identities.
That's right. Yeah. And sometimes they actually line up. Sometimes they actually sync up. Other times they argue with each other.
I know what that feels like.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. So, yeah, I guess we don't have to talk about these topics in any particular order, but I guess we could start off with talking about wisdom, because I know that you and I have sort of talked about this a little bit, Adam, not maybe probably sort of indirectly a few times, about the importance of wisdom and how hard it is to attain, and how it's sort of like the idea of enlightenment, in that it's almost impossible to achieve, but it's more of sort of a worthwhile goal. And I don't think you and I have really talked about it that much, Alex, but what do both of you think about it?
Well, I'll just kind of throw out some thoughts quickly, but for me, part of this is, look where I am in my life, right? I mean, if I got to this point and wisdom weren't more and more of a preoccupation, I'm doing something really wrong.
Yeah.
my only possibility or kind of real attempt at wisdom, I think, probably had to come later. You kind of do that with, the elderly are all sagacious and everything, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've definitely come across some people who are your age or older who don't seem to cultivate any wisdom at all.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then the moment I said that, I also know a lot of very young folks who I think are just ridiculously wise and from whom I can learn a lot. So for me, wisdom is, it really is about proportion and different than just raw intelligence. I think wisdom involves certainly a lot more emotional intelligence. And for me, more and more, intelligence without emotional intelligence really starts looking as dumb as, sheetrock mud. And I think we see ample evidence of that all the bloody time,
Maybe like stereotypes of people in your profession, Alex.
Yeah, well, yeah, well, and I have one guy in particular, not to get overly political too quickly, but
Oh, let's go there.
One of President Trump's advisors, this very young man named Stephen Miller, is clearly so overly invested in a self-identity of being smart, but he's emotionally absolutely torpid. And so it comes off like an absolute dolt, and
like Sherlock Holmes.
Well, yeah, but not,
I mean, I'm thinking of the
not nearly as brilliant.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like the new series with Benedict Cumberbatch. Not
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
not the stories so much, because he's a bit of a different character in the stories.
yeah. But so that for me, wisdom really is about proportion and about. Uh, I've said this on, I think with you before, Andrew, and it's I probably should be tired of saying it, but it seems like with wisdom, you get to a point where you start figuring out that being effective is much more important than being right.
I still need to learn that every single day almost.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Yeah, when you brought this up, I was kind of thinking of sort of like career paths, because as you said, the programming is kind of a cerebral endeavor, and you get a lot of people who don't have a ton of maybe emotional skills. But the people who really start to succeed, especially after like 10 or 20 years in the field, are the people who, yes, they spend a lot of time at the beginning learning the ins and outs of actual programming and the details, but then they start to see that all these pieces have to fit together in a way that makes the whole actually worth building and worth pursuing. So I would say at a certain point you start needing to see the bigger picture a little bit more in order to actually be successful, which is kind of an interest. I think that's true of a lot of careers, but it's interesting when people don't start picking up on that, because like you said, there's people who get to the end of their life or their career and they really haven't, we've all met people like that, but I think the people you really you want to watch and emulate are the people who start to learn that you do need to pay attention to other pieces that are not yours, that you need to integrate and understand and defer to at times.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, that makes sense in retrospect with what you're saying about the people who are successful over a long period of time. They learn to integrate their intelligence into more of focusing on goals, like why we're trying to achieve what we're striving toward and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I don't think those people are always the people who show a lot of promise at the beginning. I think people who show promise at the beginning usually like pick up on details very quickly and can build things quickly. But over long periods of time, there's a big difference between the two kinds of thinking.
Okay. Another aspect of this that we were just mentioning briefly is a way that two of these topics are related, which is the ego, and it reminds me sort of too about how, like, if you look back at ancient Greek philosophy and Socrates, and particularly Stoicism, which I'm a huge fan of too, a large part of that is about sort of restraining the ego from just taking over your brain and like allowing your elephant to trample all over the place because you're just obeying the blind rider on the top of the elephant. And that's like I was saying, that's something that, I mean, another one of the topics that we were going to discuss is confidence, which is basically almost the same thing as ego in a way too, which is interesting because I know just in terms of myself, it's sort of ironic because I really don't have very much self-confidence at all. Yet sometimes I notice, like, particularly, it's just my ego taking over when I get into like these endless, completely pointless online debates with people, which I slip into way too often, which is usually about like postmodernism or Jordan Peterson or left-wing or right-wing ideology. And I never end up learning anything from those conversations. And I'm sure the people I'm arguing with don't either.
Yeah, I think, the ego is, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, the simple take is that we really should just, do everything we can to transcend the ego. And at some point we see the wisdom in doing that. And there's the word again, wisdom. But what's clear is that probably the most healthy thing that could happen to the planet would be for everyone to develop a healthy ego first, because you can't transcend. It's hard to transcend a pathological ego because it's not sufficiently built out yet. And the ego itself is not bad.
Yeah.
I think it's more the pathology of ego that really causes so much discord, so much heartache, so much unnecessary, just bullshit.
Yeah.
And I think really trying to develop that, it's helpful to have some healthy, clear sense of self. But then you can be discerning, and you can, over time, you start to realize that it's hard to think of yourself without the welfare of others who matter to you. Like as the saying goes, a sorrow shared is halved, a joy shared is doubled. I get so much joy out of finding out the great things that are happening with family and friends. And I've come to understand that it's really hard for me to differentiate that from great things that happen to just me personally. I think
that's good in a way.
Well, our sense of self, I think, just starts to get intertwined with the fates of those who matter most to us, right?
Yeah.
And then hopefully that that in-group circle you draw becomes a little bit permeable, and more people can get inside it. And so then again, how you assess your own fate just can't help but be tied to what's going on with others. Yeah. And by the same token, then if they're going through hard times, man, it gets to you. It really, you just feel for them, and you really do get to empathy, not just sympathy.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you said there about how the ego can be useful too. I remember really learning that and sort of being surprised by it at first when I read the book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday.
Oh yeah. Isn't that great?
Yeah, he's that guy that that Tim Ferriss talks to sometimes. I thought it was really interesting because I'd never thought about ego in that way before, because I just had this this mindset of just trying to restrain your ego all the time. But that was the first time that put it into perspective for me and just made me think, oh, okay, so that does make sense. Like it can be useful to have an ego to help you accomplish goals, because there are a lot of goals that you can't accomplish unless you basically have faith in yourself and your own abilities. Yeah. And what you said about empathy and your family and people you surround yourself with too, that makes sense too. I mean, I'm sure everyone, or at least most people, can identify with that, like your immediate family and your friends and stuff, and then some people more than others. And maybe that's a good thing to cultivate too, to have more empathy in general.
Yeah, I just think, we just had our company meeting here a couple of weeks ago, and what are we up to? 21 of us, and just being at that company meeting, seeing everybody, and just seeing how excited everyone was to see each other and everything. And we really all do like each other a lot. And it's really hard for me to think about my welfare as separate from what's going on with everyone there, And again, if things go great with some of them, I feel it. When things go bad with some of them, I feel it. And I think more and more we come to understand that really, I think we just quit drawing so many distinctions between our personal fortunes and those of those around us.
Well, and those are the companies that are really successful. Like when you think of, successful startups in the beginning, or, small co-ops or something, everybody's really invested in everyone else and how they're doing, so they succeed. Yeah.
Well, and it is, I mean, ultimately, if you're just a really craven profit chaser, in business, that is actually how you would operate, because firms that really do invest into the whole, the health of the whole ecosystem, including employees, suppliers, vendors, and certainly customers, but everyone around them, they actually, by not chasing profit directly, they actually overperform on profit.
Right. But you have to have the wisdom to understand that, and a lot of people chasing profit don't.
Yeah, there's
that's sort of ironic.
Some really great work by a few authors. One I remember is a guy named Raj Sisodia, and it's called Firms of Endearment, that shows by taking that approach, they actually outperform the S&P 500 by like a factor of 3 or something like that. I mean, it's huge. It's not just a minor difference.
Wow.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we sidetracked. Now I'm trying to remember what we were talking about.
No, you're more linear than Andrew and I are.
Yeah, no.
So we're talking about
true. Yeah.
We were talking about kind of wisdom, ego, and confidence. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, ego is kind of a feeling in a way. So like any feeling, it has good and bad uses. I mean, there's a reason it exists. Otherwise it wouldn't have evolved, you know, or at least I would think.
Yeah, that's right.
Like there's some kind of use for it. But I mean, I also think we sort of depend on other people to keep these things in check. So like Stoicism to me has always felt a little bit kind of like lonely and sort of like oh, you have to do everything yourself type of philosophy. I don't know if that's true or I haven't read it, but
well, it is sort of true to an extent. I mean, it depends on, like any philosophy, it depends on which writers you focus on, because there are definitely some Stoics who seem that way more than others, but then there are some who basically emphasize the importance that their idea is that you can't be rational and you can't seek your highest virtue without developing communities of interpersonal relationships with people, which is sort of, I guess you could say it's sort of from an ego, perhaps ironically egotistical perspective, that developing a community of people can help you achieve your own goals. But I think that might be an accurate interpretation of at least some Stoics.
Well, I wanted to support Alex, so I started to look up, see what I'd get from a search of famous female Stoics. Yeah, I guess there's some there, but I mean, I couldn't think of any. And so the point is Stoicism, I mean, just like anything else, like what can we learn from any school of thought and appreciate the parts of it that work and just don't worry about the parts that aren't so great. So I think for me, Stoicism does have a decided kind of old school male bent, very much toward the individual, kind of the heroic individual thing. And
I'm thinking like Epictetus that's what's in, he's the guy in mind. I don't know if there are other like more famous guys, but
well, I think Aurelius got it. Marcus Aurelius is my go-to. I just think he was the bomb. The richest, most important man in the world. His number one preoccupation was, am I a good enough man?
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
he had every reason to be this vainglorious, selfish, despicable, drunk with power, all of that, and he seemed to get it. I mean, at least from what's reported. Certainly he had his faults and everything, but yeah, it's pretty admirable.
It depends on what you read by Epictetus too. I mean, it's been a long time since I've read it, but at least the first time I read it, his book The Art of Living was my favorite Stoic text for a while. But when I read Epictetus's discourses more recently, I like some parts of it, but some parts of it didn't make sense to me. And even though I still find some utility in Stoicism, which is sort of like the mindfulness aspect of it, the idea of experiencing your emotions, but then just sort of just moving on with your fucking day without getting attached to your emotional reactions from, like, me, for example, accidentally pouring an entire cup of coffee down the sink thinking it was a cup of water earlier today. Or but like, since learning about postmodernism and this idea that rationalism, like from mixed mental arts, that rationalism is not real, people, like humans, don't really behave rationally. That's one area where I don't agree with stoicism as much as I used to.
Well, they didn't have some of the insights. I mean, to be fair, I mean, as a culture, you know, we were still, you know, pretty well tethered to Homo economicus, and a lot of people still are. But certainly,
70s, 80s, right?
Yeah, well, it's been within the last 30 years that the whole behavioral revolution has, you know, really started to take root. And what cracks me up about that now is that the rationalists are still trying to drive their point through unexamined, because of unexamined emotional, you know, intuitions, and the you know, intuitionists actually have the better scientific backing now, and so it's just, I mean, it's just funny. But again, we all need to, as the the Václav Havel, the first president of Poland after the wall came down, had the great quote about the line of good and evil isn't between us and them, but it runs through the heart of every person. So does hyperreactivity, the stupid, kind of dumb automatic system one thinking versus the slow it down, more deliberate system two thinking and everything. And so you have people on all sides who, succumb to automaticity and reactivity still too much. I think all of us do. I think it's an opportunity for all of us to, be able to recognize what's going on better and go, oh, okay, I'm doing that dumb thing now. Let me let the smarter, wiser part of me back into the picture here.
Yeah. Something that I was just thinking about in relation to that is like how humility is related to wisdom and ego and confidence too, because like there are some people more than others. It's interesting. It seems like usually they're extremely intelligent people, but who are blinded by their arrogance and ego, and probably could learn more if they weren't so egotistical. And like and so maybe humility would do them better, but rather than just pointing fingers, like also in terms of myself, like when I get sucked into completely pointless debates with people that don't lead anywhere about philosophy or politics or something like that, the one thing that I have to relearn over and over again is that I have to have the humility to just let people win arguments, regardless of what they say. If it gets to a point where it's really obvious that I'm not learning anything and I'm just wasting my time because we're both talking past each other or something like that.
Right.
Well, and I think it's how you define what a win is, and if it's just kind of this really obvious kind of dumb, superficial, again, I the 10 times Ben Shapiro crushed.
I never watched those videos. They're so.
I just like, who's that appealing to? I mean, I know who it's appealing to. It's appealing to me when I was 15.
Yeah.
But at some point you just kind of go.
15-year-old boys drive most of the internet traffic, I would say, especially.
No one really wins in any of that kind of ridiculousness. The win would be for. So have either of you seen some of the video of Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson talking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't watch the video. I listened to it. I love it.
I'm just so impressed by it because Russell they were both fine not to agree with each other on everything. And they didn't, there really was this spirit of much more of inquiry than advocacy. And I think that's another balance that we always have to, kind of be aware of. Are we in just pure advocate mode all the time? Or do we look for opportunities to inquire and just say, hey, I'm just going to let the advocate, I've done enough of that today. I'm going to go inquire now.
Yeah. Or just like preventing yourself from doing too much of like the other sort of side of that too. Like, for example, a few people have mentioned to me that I've gotten like obsessed with criticizing Jordan Peterson lately, and they've gotten the impression from that I'm one of those people who thinks that he's like a total idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about, which really isn't true, because I still think he makes a lot of good points, and people get mad at me for saying that sometimes. And he really does, like, people have this impression of him being angry too. And I think maybe that's sometimes true, and he sort of gets triggered about some things, but he often does sound like when he's talking to people, he's trying to like figure out what he thinks about something as he's talking. And like, I think I really try to do both of those things too, like advocate for people and then inquire too. Like even when I'm a huge fan of someone, it's really more difficult when you're doing that, when you're a huge fan of someone, to try to question your perceptions of that. And like you were saying, that's really important too.
Yeah. Something I've also noticed is when you're really doing a good job and you're having a good discussion, it doesn't just stop at one point. Usually, like, you can take it, through the next couple of days, weeks, months. But when you're doing a bad thing and you're not inquiring, or you're just agreeing with each other the whole time, then it kind of just ends because there's nothing more to say. So
yeah.
That's really helpful, Alex. Thank you. You just helped me make a connection that I had kind of always thought of this at the individual level, but never kind of at the dialogical level, or even in a group level or whatever. But it's Barbara Fredrickson is this great researcher at the University of North Carolina, and she came up with it's called the broaden and build theory. And what she says is that the positive emotions, the ones that we would just kind of naturally think of as positive, tend to broaden and build. They create more options. They build on what you're starting with and everything. The negative emotions tend to narrow and impel. They just kind of narrow. They say, we don't want a lot of options here. We want one answer, and then we want to go do something with it, right? And you think how evolutionarily why that evolved, and it's pretty clear. When you're in a moment of danger, you don't really want to spend a lot of time examining options. You want to figure out what's the one thing I need to do right now, and I need to get on it. I need to quit thinking and really start doing. But to your point, Alex, about conversation, where there is more of an overall positive approach that can still deal with important differences. It's not, ignoring any differences and just going, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that gets pretty tedious after a while as well. And so it's really helped to have enough difference so that you can actually build, you can actually incorporate, you have some new thoughts now because of interacting with this other person or with a few other people, whatever. And so it's back to, it's how we assess difference, what we want to is, I guess maybe it's just being a little more clear about what we want to get, what we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of that to me speaks to what you were saying about sort of this mindset of inquiry. Like, I think from all the conversations that I've had with both of you and that we're having now too, we both seem to have the mindset of inquiry. And yeah, we all agree about a lot, but when we do disagree, there's no like animosity, and there's still respect for each other there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think.
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I mean, I was thinking earlier when we were talking about like family, how much more like forgiving we are with people that we really know. Like when they say something like kind of off color or like silly or whatever, we say, well, you know what, like I'm just going to ignore that and we're going to like move on. But when you are talking to people who you don't know as well, you're more likely to latch on to those maybe, you know, awful things that they say, and you like really, really take them to heart and think they're really important, not just a flippant remark that they're going to forget about later.
Well, I think that depends too, though, because I think my own experience has been mostly exactly what you're describing, but I think like sometimes it depends on the issue for me too. Like for example, sometimes if I get into arguments with my brother, it seems like both of us are more emotional about it because we have a close relationship and we actually really care about what that person thinks about it. Whereas with someone else, we might not care about it as much because it doesn't matter as much to us whether they disagree with us about one particular thing or another.
But when you're with your brother, can you just like yell at him and then once it's done and you don't keep revisiting the same topics?
No, we keep revisiting the same topics.
Because I feel like with my sisters, and in particular, one of them I'm trying to start like a small side business with. So we've had a few arguments, but we just scream at each other. We like say horrible things, and then when it's over, because we have the safety that we can like yell at each other, and nobody's going anywhere. No one's going to be like, "I'm never talking to you again."
This whole idea of it's easier to have tougher conversations where there's a fund of goodwill built up, right?
That makes sense.
But what's interesting to me, it just occurs as I'm listening here, I'm speculating. So I do this a lot. I like to speculate. But what would need to be true to have that fund of goodwill, even with people that we haven't developed a much of a relationship with? Or rather, I guess, what would need to be true? Like, can we carry around our own fund of goodwill? Like, can we have just like a kind of a general purpose, and kind of an assumption of positive intent on the part of everyone and then don't be a dupe until it's proven that you really shouldn't have that assumption about truly bad actors. But it's the notion that, Alex, I don't know if you ever heard this. I think Andrew and I actually talked about this on a podcast, but I'll tell it very quickly. So Andrew, do you remember me telling you about Bill's Law?
No, I don't.
Okay, so to recap quickly, for those in the mixed martial arts community, you may be tired. Some of you may be tired of hearing this, but when I was in grad school, I managed a music store, and I was in a band with one of my sales guys. And he was an older guy. He's about 15 years older than me. Good old boy from Bedford, Indiana, named Tug Beal. I was going to Indiana University in Bloomington. And we were at the store one night, and it was super slow. It was a Tuesday night in Bedford, Indiana, and nothing was happening. So we were just kind of like, we had a lot of great opportunity to, have great conversations. And we were just talking about getting along with others. And Tug just kind of said, Adam, you can get along with anyone if you'll spot them 2 character flaws. and I, like right at that moment, I just realized how absolutely brilliant that was. And I just thought, like, holy hell, Tug, that's so good. I so get it. I mean, I have certainly more than 2 character flaws, but I hope people will cut me some slack. But it's that idea that when there's actually something almost kind of weirdly reassuring about interacting with real humans and seeing their faults, and if you can just kind of get that sense of proportion. And so when something comes up that's kind of weird that they're doing, you don't like it, it doesn't throw you so much off kilter. You just kind of go, yeah, okay, check. We're on track here.
Well, I
Uh,
think that's something that honor cultures do really, really well, actually.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
I've actually had this argument with a few people who are, they are more like Western, like pro-Western values, which, is great. But I've tried to explain that I think we can learn a lot from cultures that are very different that maybe we won't be carrying forward as much into the future,
yeah,
but like people in honor cultures are like really open and kind and generous, and they'll like give you, they'll spot you money without knowing you and just assume you'll like pay it back. And um, they don't like, they're not as tentative when they're meeting you. So I kind of think like there's a lot to be learned from some other places that we don't normally talk about, as other than Europe. But yeah, it's a hard thing to do when you didn't grow up like that, because you just sort of assume that people are dangerous, or not dangerous, but you don't know, so you don't want to take the risk.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that's one aspect of honor culture that I think is pretty important, and it's interesting. I'm pretty sure I probably stole this idea from someone, but I'm pretty like it seems like when you're looking at like political ideologies, for example, that's a pretty common right-wing one. And no, I think it might be Jonathan Haidt that brought this up, actually, that um, the people on the left wing rather than people on the right wing have a more difficult time organizing groups and making things happen than people on the right, because they have less of that loyalty aspect from honor culture. And I've noticed that, like, if I bring that point up with people who are like maybe a little bit more left leaning than I am, and I usually try to bring up that point in that way so as not to offend people, but I don't always do the best job of that. But I think that's like, obviously there there are values associated with different cultures that are more left-leaning political values that people on the right wing could definitely benefit from copying more too. It's not that there's like one side that's superior to the other.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, yeah. I really like the metaphor of ideology as software, not as and not even like operating system software, but just like programs. So like, when I'm running Microsoft Excel, I don't imagine that I can solve everything with Excel, and I use it only as long as I need to and everything. And then I go, oh, okay, I need to get out of it now. I need to go over to Word, or I need to go do whatever it is, or my favorite, my mind mapping software. Um, uh, but we are so quick to find identity in a school of thought instead of just seeing each school of thought as just another tool. And that's what gets frustrating to me, is just like, okay, it's wonderful that you're so you're so invested in this thing, but why can't you keep all that's good with that and then figure out how to get other tools for your toolkit from other schools of thought? I mean, that's just it just seems like the pragmatic thing. I know that we are social critters, and so it's easy to bond over ideology.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of like the ideology really only is a tool, and we don't serve the tool serves us. And we're really quick to confuse means and ends.
And yeah, oh, sorry.
No, that's it. That's it.
And people obviously get that way with religions or with atheism or with different realms of philosophy too. Like, since I've been learning much more about philosophy over this past year or so, I've gotten into philosophical arguments with people who view one particular philosophy is having all the answers. And I probably sound that way sometimes to people too, because I do like some philosophies more than others, but I try to take that mindset that you were talking about earlier, Adam, this like Bruce Lee quote that is one of the philosophies of mixed mental arts now, which is to take what is useful, ignore what is not, and make it uniquely your own, and sort of construct
Absolutely.
your own worldview by taking what is useful to you from all of these different things, like political worldviews, philosophical worldviews, and religious views or lack thereof, or anything like that.
So in any domain, that approach, which honors and incorporates more of the tested, demonstrably valuable facets of each different school of thought, the more we can incorporate and honor all of that instead of just going, hey, I'm just this guy.
Yeah.
It would seem that we're actually getting a better grasp on, I even hate to use the word reality because it's such a tough thing to chase. And we think we have, we delude ourselves into thinking that we get a stranglehold on it. And of course we never do. And, but it seems like at least we make a better approximation to whatever reality could be when we're more open, but again, not just open for openness sake, but open to the stuff that's been tested, that is shown to have value. And then you just go, yeah. And so for me, the whole, like arguments about postmodernism on both sides of it, like people who can't think outside of postmodernism and people who think postmodernism is just the latest tool of Satan. I can't. No, there are some clear benefits to what postmodernism brought to the table. All ideas are situated in a context, and to ignore that and to not want to understand what the context in which they first developed, how that skewed the development of the idea and everything, maybe it's back to wisdom again. It's just not very wise. But then you don't owe, like a philosophy has no feelings. You won't disappoint it by not by being questioning of it in any way,
Well, I don't think people realize they can choose. Like, we have the ability to choose what we value. Like you can just experiment with it. Like, I mean, you can choose to value like anything. Like we could all decide tomorrow that we want to go back to like human sacrifices and stuff. And like,
yeah,
we can do that. But I don't think people realize that. I think they think like, okay, I see the world this way now. And that's because of, the conclusions I've come to, and I have no control over that because that's just how I think. But they really do. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've made some choices in the past few years that have really changed my life. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, metacognition is an actual thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you were saying earlier, Alex, like the like traditional Western values, so to speak, they do have some values, and people who think that they should be thrown out completely sort of confuse me sometimes. But just having this this mindset of inquiry towards them, people like sometimes seem to get pissed off if you even question them in any way. But a lot of these, like, it's interesting to me in the writing of Foucault, for example, examining some of like how some of these values of Western society came about and the history behind them, just because it's interesting. Like, it's interesting, and like I think sometimes really important for, I don't know, like a Western value like freedom of speech, for example, but looking at how it came about and how it developed into being so important to everyone is interesting too. And like one thing that I bring up all the time lately is learning from reading in Foucault's book, The History of Sexuality, which I was really surprised by at first, that until I think it was the 1500s or 1600s, when science got applied to sexuality, people didn't have these labels of homosexual and heterosexual and everything else, and people could just experiment with their sexuality without being slapped with this label. So like people were homosexuals, but it wasn't bad to be homosexual and that sort of thing.
Right. And there you had your marriage, and that was like a social duty, and then outside of that, like whatever you were doing was like whatever. And like
yeah
in a way people were kind of less judgmental, I guess.
yeah
So some of that, I'm guessing, is just kind of part of the kind of like the scientific revolution. The moment science becomes a thing, you start drawing lines and labeling so you can, taxonomy is science has taxonomy, and so now we're starting to notice patterns, and maybe we're too quick to assume that the pattern is that simple and that inviolable and all that and everything. But I'm wondering if that isn't part of it. It's back to also the idea that 1,000 years ago people didn't, there was no concept really of, well, maybe it's more than 1,000 years, but whatever. The lay people, most people made no distinction between mythos and logos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that a lot of the preoccupation in religion and everything, and fundamentalism is a new thing. That's only been a kind of a creature of the last 120, 130 years, maybe.
But that new?
Yeah, fundamentalism really is, and it's tied, I think, to it's tied to modernism, and it's tied to wanting a more rigid taxonomy.
I've been reading a lot about King Alfred the Great, and so he's
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
what brought that up?
So I've always kind of liked Vikings and stuff.
They're awesome.
I got into a couple of like shows that were, it's sort of a popular like TV show topic these days. And then just started like reading a little bit more. And he wrote a lot and like had a lot compiled and was very, very like pro-literacy. Like he would make all of his generals learn how to read so that he could send messages and things like that. Which was really unusual for the time because this was like the 800s. So few people could read. But what's kind of interesting is like on the outside, you would say like the people of the time were all religious fanatics because that was how they identified themselves. They were a Christian or they were a Dane or they were like, what it was, whoever their God was basically. And so there were a lot of like struggles between like the native Britons and the Anglo-Saxons because they were they had like conquered the Britons, but like they were still practicing like sort of like half pagan, half Christian, life and stuff. Yeah, they never quite got rid of it. But even when you like drill down into the individual like villages and stuff, every village, every group of people was totally different in what they actually believed. But when it came time to actually like fight an army, they all rallied behind each other and just like said, okay, well, we're all the Christians. Even though if you probably interviewed each person, they didn't believe the same thing or like think that, whatever, like Jesus was, the son of God or whatever.
Yeah, they didn't have a creedal checklist or
exactly.
Yeah.
It was like you were baptized, you're a Christian. End of story.
Yeah. That's cool. I would love if you could you send me the link to the book?
Yeah, sure. I was also reading the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which was originally compiled by Alfred the Great and then continued on through the 1200s. So like, I guess it was actually in 2 different languages because it's pre-Norman invasion and post.
Oh, fascinating.
But like, I'm reading a modern English translation, so I don't know. But yeah, I'll send you the link.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I am Danish, so.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And he actually he ended up converting a lot of Danes just because their culture was like a warring culture. and they all kind of started getting tired, and they just wanted to like stay in their village and like farm instead of constantly be, you know, on a ship and fighting.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they weren't having the lovely expanded diet of fish stew and potatoes often enough back in there.
Well, if they thought that England was a great place to like start a farm, then, you know, things probably weren't that great in in wherever they came from.
Yeah, the whole east coast of Denmark, or rather of England, any town now that ends in BY, like Derby or whatever, that was the Vikings.
Yeah, the Danes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, I want to learn more about this too, because yeah, Vikings are badasses. And I really liked relatively recently reading Neil Gaiman's book on Norse mythology.
Yeah,
which is really interesting.
It's very good.
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting. I especially liked this. I really liked many aspects of it, but I like this idea at the end of the idea of Ragnarok, which is sort of the equivalent of the Book of Revelations in the Bible, in a way. But the idea, I really like the idea in Ragnarok that it's not the end of the world. It's the end of one period of time, and then it's also a new beginning. So it's this sort of endless cycle of time that you see in Buddhism and Hinduism and ways of thinking like that.
Yeah.
I also just picked up a book called The Origins of Satan, which you might be.
Oh, Elaine Pagels.
Yeah.
I've read that.
I haven't read it yet, but
it's so good.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was like really surprised to find out a lot of things that like I just always assumed about the Book of Revelations, and that it was like really, it's not meant to be like a true thing. It's like an encoded story that people at the time would recognize, like, okay, like I'm not gonna, like, he's not talking about a devil, but like it's a you know, it's an allegory for like the Roman, you know, government or whatever.
Oh, it is?
Well, it seems like so like the beast was like the 666, I guess.
Seven-headed dragon?
Yeah, I think I mean, again, I haven't read the whole book, but like I think in general, like it wasn't meant to say like, okay, this is what happens at the end of the world. It was meant to say like, hey, you guys, like if we let the Romans do this, then this will be like kind of the end of our society. So we have to like, you know, stick together and like resist certain whatever was going on. I mean,
like sorry.
No, I mean, the fact that people take it seriously now is like very strange, because that wasn't what it was.
They take it literally.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and it's back to the
literally not seriously, seriously not literally.
Well, it's what you know, the quote from Joseph Campbell that I'll paraphrase poorly, but he said so there are a couple things going on, and they both kind of miss the point, and that is that you know, non-religious people who are, you know, angry about religion criticize religious metaphor because it's not actual. And then too many of the very religious don't see it as metaphor, but they see it as actual as well. And so nobody is, they're both misusing metaphor. They're both ignoring like really what's really going on. And so, you know, a lot of non-religious people, I think, reasonably dismiss the overall literalness. And then a lot of religious people don't understand that the real value of so much of scripture is in the metaphor. So, I mean, like my example is, you know, the Sermon on the Mount and the story of, you know, all the loaves and fishes. You know, if my takeaway as a believer was supposed to be that molecular magic was performed, I don't know what that does to inform my daily life. I don't know what that, like, what do I extract? What can I do with that? And how can I become a better person for interpreting that story that way, rather than hey, when lots of people get together, united under a common purpose, look what cool things can happen, and look what can emerge. And the real miracle there is not a molecular magic that a couple fishes and loaves fed hundreds, but that generosity, emerged, and people came together and really created good things.
Oh.
Yeah, and I can do something with that.
Yeah, yeah, and I like that. I like that sort of political aspect of Jesus in the Bible, and the Bible too, about how people like Jesus was such a revolutionary figure because he challenged the Roman Empire, and people were worried about that. But I like the book of Revelations is my favorite book of the Bible because it's so like psychedelic. It's like it was written by someone on mushrooms.
It may have been. We don't know.
Yeah.
Well, different parts of the world have different kinds of drugs too. I mean, there could have been something that, like, that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Are either of you familiar with the old Dutch or Flemish painter Hieronymus Bosch?
No.
Yeah, I love Bosch.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? So the triptych, the Garden of Earthly Delights,
Yeah.
and it looks like an acid trip that went really bad. And you go, how did this guy? I mean, it kind of is Occam's razor. I don't know how to explain that any better way.
Yeah.
He clearly had a good imagination, but there was some other stuff going. Yeah, that was aided somehow.
Yeah. Well, a lot of his paintings are like that. So he was doing something like a lot.
Yeah. Well, and it also could have been just, it could have been mental fixation. Could have been, could have been a little bit of mental illness, or who knows, But yeah, it is. I read a really great book by Terry Tempest Williams called Leap, which is just essentially the whole book is her just considering that painting. I think it's at the Prado in Madrid.
Yes.
Yeah, and I haven't been there yet, but I really want to get there because I really want to.
In that state, my family and I went to Spain and Madrid and Paris in the same trip, and we went from the Louvre, which is there's amazing things, but it's so crowded and it's so and it's just kind of miserable in a lot of ways.
Well, it's a tourist trap, totally.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, some of it's beautiful, but then we went to the Prado, and it's quiet, and there aren't that many people, and you can just stand in front of whatever you want for 25 minutes, and no one will bother.
That's great.
Oh, wow.
That's what it's all about.
But something else I've wondered about with some of these painters is I don't have very good eyesight. So when I've always worn contacts or glasses, but when I don't have glasses or anything, I start seeing weird things. Everything's blurry, but you think you're seeing an animal across the path or whatever. So I wonder if sometimes these people also had bad eyesight.
Oh, that's an interesting theory.
Have access to a lens or something.
Yeah, that might be true. Yeah. In terms of drugs, have you heard of this theory? There's this theory that Moses, when he saw the burning bush, he had this vision of God because the plant that was burning was this sort of plant that was common in that area during that age, that has a very high amount of DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, which is the most powerful psychedelic that we know of. And also, I forget. Oh yeah, this book called "The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross" by John Marco Allegro, which is all. And he was the only agnostic member of the first 4 people who discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he was the only one who was not an ordained Catholic priest. And he thought that early Christianity was all about fertility rituals and drug cults.
Interesting.
Well, many Christian denominations have kept the fertility part. in a different way. Yeah, and
in a way less interesting way.
Yeah. And then have done everything possible to demonize drugs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I think is funny because, like, especially if you do psychedelics, you can have experiences that seem like what people define as religious experiences. Like the second time that I ate mushrooms, there was literally a point where I felt like I literally had a like metaphysical connection with every living being throughout the entire universe that ever has existed, exists right now, and that ever will exist.
So my variant on that was I had a medical procedure here now, probably about 12 years ago, and I won't go into the gory details, but I had 4 outpatient surgeries over the course of 2 months. And so during that whole time, I couldn't have any caffeine. It just kind of, you heal less. It's kind of like what's it called? Your blood doesn't coagulate as well if you have a lot of caffeine coursing through your system. So I already kind of anticipated what it was going to be like to have that first cup of coffee after that. And that probably skewed it. It was probably even greater than it would have been. But after not having, so it's probably 3 months, my first cup of coffee, I wanted to hug the world. It was just the most amazing feeling. And I remember thinking, do you know what? Probably every few years I should just go off caffeine entirely so I can have that feeling again. Because it really was amazing. I couldn't believe how great I felt. It was just massive euphoria.
Oh wow. Yeah, I can drink a cup of coffee and then take a nap.
Yeah, so can I. Yeah, I can drink coffee right before going to bed. It doesn't affect
me.
Right.
Yeah. I try to have like just 1 cup of coffee 1 day a week, but that doesn't seem like that's not really much of a break. But I don't get this like I don't get this withdrawal that some people apparently get when they stop drinking coffee after drinking it regularly. Have either of you experienced that?
Yeah, some headache.
Yeah, I get like a headache if I haven't had coffee.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
But seriously, work through that. Do it sometime. At some point in your life, just say, okay, I'm gonna go 2 months, no coffee, just so I can have that experience on the back end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think I could do that. I drink tea also anyway, which has a very small amount of caffeine, but it seems like I mostly drink caffeine because I enjoy it. It doesn't really seem to have that much of an energizing effect.
Yeah, I don't know.
Individual chemistry.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
But I don't know. Like if I took 2 months off of it, like you did, maybe I would have a very different experience. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, kids at home, your results may vary.
Yeah, and don't do mushrooms, or maybe do.
Yeah. You're gonna start putting disclaimer language like on
yeah.
No, but back to psychedelics. Are you either of you familiar with Michael Pollan? His last book was How to Change Your Mind.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I have read a few of his books.
Well, this is a guy that I don't think anyone would imagine that he would have been the first psychonaut warrior to come forward with this. But he just said, look, we have the data now, and everything that's going on, even with microdosing LSD and everything. And yes, you need to be wise, you need to be careful, you need to appreciate what your mental faculties and want to take care of them. and you need to be responsive to what we're learning, you know, and understand that there is something going on there. This is not me saying that I'm about to jump into that anytime soon. Because, you know, I am a grandpa, and I don't know that it would necessarily affect me the way it would a younger person, and so I'm likely not to go there. But it is interesting, and I think, you know, so this book by Chuck Klosterman, But What If We're Wrong, which says, the premise of it is that, you know, it's not that hard for us to go back even 20 years and see what we obviously had wrong as a culture. The further back you go, the easier that is. And yet when it comes to wondering about what we're currently doing that will be seen by future us as just as you know, kind of absurd, it's hard to imagine what that is. I think the slow movement here on kind of drug policy is going to be one thing that we're going to go, yeah, it's good we finally kind of work through that.
Yeah, I think so too. Like for one thing, we're doing a mixed mental arts chat soon on that book, The New Jim Crow, which is basically a pretty data-driven book about how, particularly in America, the war on drugs disproportionately affects Black people to a huge extent.
Oh, clearly.
Yeah.
Well, and even, I mean, you go back to some of the stuff that's on record from the Nixon administration, and it was by design.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't even, you know, a lot of bad things that happen are unintended consequences. And then some bad things that happen are designed.
Yeah, definitely. And like and they're even like for example, if we're even talking about harder drugs, I forget where exactly it was, but I'm pretty sure there are at least 1 or 2 different countries that either legalized or decriminalized heroin, and people can but people, if they want to get some heroin, they have to go and get it injected at a heroin clinic, and then you get clean needles and you get unadulterated heroin that doesn't have like fentanyl or something added to it, and people can go there and get that done. And then it basically seems like it's mostly functional heroin addicts who do that. They go and get some heroin and then they go to work or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, Portugal.
Mm-hmm. Oh
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Also, those centers are equipped with like if you go there and you're addicted, you can contact an addiction specialist or a therapist, or, you know, like it's a sort of a hub for like services too. It's not just here's your drugs and like leave, you know?
Yeah.
So the right view that addiction is a health thing, not a legal thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I totally believe in the addictive personality thing, because I've never gotten addicted to any drugs. And there are people like one of my really good friends, he was addicted to weed. He would have like he would literally experience like mild withdrawal if he would stop smoking weed, and he like for a long time he just fit the negative stereotype about stoners, where he would get baked and just like not really accomplish things all day.
Oh.
Well, I think we've also talked about David Foster Wallace on Mixed Mental Arts. And I don't know if you've read Infinite Jest, but like I think that book really shows you how you can be addicted to literally anything.
Oh yeah.
It's not just, I mean, I think he famously said that, like, despite having drug problems, he always said like his greatest addiction was the television. Yeah. And he just couldn't like get away from it sometimes.
Well, I mean, it's the dopamine game, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like push lever, get pellet, you know, and the lever can be bloody anything.
Whatever. It's a personal thing. Yeah.
And it is strange too, because even though like I don't have an addictive personality at all, the one thing I think is because I have really strong obsessive compulsive characteristics. The one thing that I do seem to be really addicted to is work. Like I'm a really super strong workaholic, and every day I just like it's really destructive because I have to do everything on my to-do list, and I stopped making physical to-do lists because they felt like they were imprisoning me. But even just in my mental to-do list, I have this mindset where I have to do every single thing I plan on doing. I can't let go of any one of them, even if it makes me have a longer day every day and get to bed later every day and ruin my schedule more every day, which is, it's so strange because it's like it feels like it's literally a mortal sin if I let go of something. And it's also so strange to me because I didn't get that way until until more recent years in my life. For most of my life, I guess because I didn't have that many like profound interests as I do now, it's like since I developed an obsession with learning and reading and writing and creative expression and just accomplishing things, it's like I'm addicted to accomplishing things.
So do you brought up a couple of words that are really interesting to me, and my wonderful wife, we started having this conversation a few decades ago, but she draws and it's really helpful to me, she draws the distinction between passion and obsession. And so how do you keep a passion from lapsing into an obsession is kind of the headline. Most obsessions at one point were a passion. And the way my wife, it's very simple, and you kind of alluded to it, Andrew, is that the moment it does become unhealthy, you know, I think maybe I guess it is a thing of proportion, you know, and the moment it becomes a compulsion, unhealthy, anything like that, then it's no longer just a passion, and it is now an obsession. And I've had moments of obsession, I think, and yeah, it's weird. It's not good. I think I've largely yeah, I think I can get past that. I might be kidding myself. I don't know.
I think it also usually comes with like feelings of a deep insecurity. Like Andrew, you
Oh, I
mentioned,
definitely have that.
yeah, like you feel like it's really, really bad if you don't finish your to-do list or something like that. But when you're just doing something that you're passionate about and enjoying and like you're good at, you don't usually feel that like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Kind of.
Yeah, like I don't feel that way right now.
Mm-hmm. But the more you like encounter that feeling, the more you can recognize it and say like, okay, maybe I should step back and like, you know.
Well, that is, I mean, that's kind of like one of the insights of, I think, of emotional intelligence and metacognition, right? Is that it's trite, but we really are not our feelings. And
Yeah.
feelings are just a thing that our body is doing. And it's usually has some kind of somatic experience to it and everything. And when you think about it, you go, oh, okay, that's happening again, that thing. Mm-hmm. And you know, too often it is the amygdala. It's the amygdala hijack. You know, it's okay, I'm going to take charge now. Whatever's going on, I've kind of asserted control over the host here. Yeah. And it's the idea that not to be able to step back and manage that and bring back into the picture those capabilities that only we have as humans. Really, it places us at no advantage over those life forms that can't do that, you know. And so you know, I don't know if all other animals have an amygdala. You know, most larger animals I think do. I think all mammals do, certainly. But you know, we're the only ones that have this kind of advanced prefrontal cortex that is the wiser part of us. That is the seat of system 2 deliberate thinking and all that good stuff and everything. And so I think overall, and this is, you know, for a guy who spent a lot of his life just operating from gut and having some good results because of that and everything, I'm really trying to be much more thoughtful about it, and particularly when I now almost every time I can tell when the amygdala hijack is going on, and then I can go, oh, okay, And I met a guy at a conference a couple of years ago who said, look, it can be a difference of 6 seconds. So if you just 6 seconds, breathe, just kind of work through it. But
it's also informative, right? It's not just like an obstacle to overcome. It tells
that's right
about what's going on. So it's valuable,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you want then you want to be able to process the data skillfully.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do want to operate with the whole brain, clearly. It's not it's not the prefrontal cortex bludgeoning the rest of the brain into subservience always. But it's just working more. It's the idea, make war with a multitude of counselors, including, the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I'm self-aware enough to understand when those things are happening, like what is happening and why it's happening. It's just the harder part is to change my behavior, which is like a skill that you can build for through, like we were talking about earlier, like mindfulness. And I know you and I have talked, Adam, about meditation that seems to help too. And yeah, I was reminded too of what you were saying there, where like when I get really depressed, it's like I notice that it's just me viewing the world through the lens of my internal experience and my thoughts. So I like constantly have to say, the world is not your thoughts. You are here right now experiencing this thing. It's not like I get stressed out over the thoughts that are circulating over my head, or I like get pissed off or irritated about something, and then I get attached to that or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, we think that's us and not just something that's happening within us.
Yeah. Or that we're predicting everything right, like I'm like a horrible, like I just assume that the worst thing is going to happen usually, and most of the time, like even sometimes when I'm just like late to work or something, I start like cooking up like this whole thing in my brain, and everyone's going to be mad, and like I have to come up with some excuse and all this like stuff, and then like normally I walk into the office and no one even like notices. They're just like, so it's hard to like separate yourself from the rest of your thoughts from the rest of the world.
Well, I've had that exact same experience countless times.
It's hard to imagine a world that doesn't have us as the pivot point.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah, well, this is a way that in terms of depression and anxiety and things, this is how that sort of thing is related to all those other topics too, like ego and humility and confidence. And one of the ways that those sort of relationships can go multiple ways is that another topic we were going to talk about is suicide, and like that and depression are a clear example of things where you need to have more confidence and like literally build your ego up more. And I know like I've had really bad experiences with that, and I know you responded to this when I posted about it on the Facebook group, Adam. And oh yeah, I was just reminded too about how I posted on there talking about my own suicidal thoughts that I've had before, because I heard Willie Santilli said that there isn't enough vulnerability on the group, and it scared him when I mentioned that, because I think he thought that I was about to like kill myself right then or something. But I was trying to make the point that I've had suicidal thoughts many times throughout my life, and lately it seems like they're happening less often than they would normally happen before, which is a good thing. And like I haven't told very many people this, but last year, I think maybe about 5 or 6 months ago, there was a lot of really terrible stuff happening at the same time. My mom had to go to the hospital twice within 3 days, and I had these sort of thoughts that I get every time I have suicidal thoughts, like, no one will ever love me. I'm a worthless human being. I don't contribute to anything in the world. I'm going to be stuck in the same worthless position for my whole life and stuff like that. And literally, like, got to the point where I thought, what has stopped me from, like, attempting to commit suicide before is that I always think, well, my family will miss me if I'm gone. And since I don't believe in an afterlife, I think, well, even life is better than nothing happening after. But I just got to the point where I thought, oh, I don't even care. I'm not even sure that people will care. So that's the closest I ever came to attempting to commit suicide. And this is hard to talk about, but I realized that one thing that can stop you from doing that is that you're killing a human being, and it's hard to kill a human being. Like, it made me understand in movies when someone is pointing a gun at someone and they can't pull the trigger because
Yeah.
it feels physically difficult to kill someone. And
Yeah.
I came really close. I came really close to killing myself. I put my pull-up bar over top of my door. I wrapped my belt. I tied my belt around it, and I was about to put it around my neck, and I couldn't do it, which is a good thing, because the next day was the second time within 3 days when my mom had to go to the hospital. So if I had done that, I probably would have died, and then my mom probably would have died the next day. But I know I've been talking for a long time, but the overall point I'm trying to make is that, as I said when I talked about this a little bit on the Mixed Mental Arts page, is that becoming more of a part of a community in mixed mental arts and developing relationships with people like you, Alex, and you, Adam, and just focusing on my creative expression more, and also some plans for big changes that I've made for this year that I've told you about, Alex, and including that trip to New York. Well, I'll get to meet both of you. All of these things are reasons that, instead of having, like, suicidal thoughts practically every day like I was before, sometimes I go through periods where I have them fairly often, but then sometimes I have periods where I only have that sort of thought, like, every week or so, or maybe even sometimes every couple weeks when things are going really well.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, what I love, Andrew, is that you're bringing so much self-awareness to it, and that you understand kind of the mechanism, what's going on. And so I think I told you before, I'm not, I won the genetic lottery in one sense, in that my neurology, just my neurotransmitter makeup is such that I'm an absurdly cheerful guy. And I've only had depression once, and it was totally situational, and I understood totally what was going on. And it was, and I actually got to the point where during that time, and because I'd never been depressed before, like, it was shocking to me. And I think I did it poorly because I sucked at it as, a newbie.
Can you do being depressed well?
Well, I think you can, when, I don't know if people who experience depression a lot can really remember what it was like the first time. Yeah, maybe some can, maybe some can't. But
it feels like we were talking about earlier. for me at least, it feels like an aspect of my identity. Like I always phrase it as my depression, like it's
Yeah.
my limb or something like that.
I mean, it's largely, yes, there can be environmental triggers and everything, but it's largely a neurotransmitter. It's neurochemistry. It's a neurochemical event. And I remember one day where it finally got bad enough. I wouldn't say I felt suicidal, but I remembered thinking distinctly that my being in the picture was kind of futile. Like I sat down with my wife and kids. This is years ago. This was 22 years ago or so. And I just remember sitting down at the dinner table with them and everything, and just looking around. And when I realized I couldn't feel any joy in that moment, then I thought, okay, something's going on. Something's really wrong here. I need to fix it. And then like the next day, I remembered that my vision was actually affected. Colors became muted to me.
Oh, wow.
Which I just thought, holy, like, sepia tone art, and cinematography, kind of cool. I don't want to live that way though, And so I scheduled an appointment with the doctor immediately and said, okay, I understand what the cause of this is. I know what's going on. I'm feeling a lot of stress. I was in a situation where I was swimming against the current every day in my work and just in the personal situation I was in. And that's where I said, I got to see a doctor. I got to get this figured out, and I got to get on a path. I got to plan my exit strategy from this job and life situation. And it was really, I wouldn't want to ever go through it again, but it was tremendously clarifying for me in some really important ways. And I think it gave me additional fuel to go, yeah, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I'm really good at. And I'm just not going to let anything get in between me and that ever again, So I'm glad I had that experience in that, other than that, I don't think I ever could have been empathetic with someone going through depression. I could have been sympathetic, and I think I'm a nice guy, and I like to think I'm a good friend and a good family member and everything. And I'm always open to, being a sounding board and everything. But because of going through that, I really get it. And it's not fun.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, that's interesting though, that it helped you develop empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it got me off. I'll just cop to it myself. I don't know if anyone else who's never gone through depression would cop to it, but I think I was probably a little judgmental. And there were some people in my family who had, my mom, kind of struggled with depression. But I remember, to quote, Andrew, are you a fan by any chance of the great Canadian TV show Letterkenny?
Oh yeah, I watched that. I coincidentally watched that for the first time with my uncle Ken.
Oh, it's great. But one of the great lines, which I've heard before, but they played it so well, was, get off the cross. We need the wood.
That's
hard
funny.
hard no. But I mean, I think I kind of felt that way a lot. I would see people who, I think it was hard for me to distinguish between depression and just kind of bullshit martyr complexes and I didn't even have sympathy for that stuff before I'd gone through this, because I didn't get it. And I just thought, okay, come on. And to your point, Andrew, about, life is so wildly improbable, and you're both young enough that you don't appreciate this fully yet, but pretty soon you'll start to get how absurdly short it is. Even a full, robust, I mean, even if we can eke out 90 years, that's absolutely nothing. And I'm now actually starting to think like, man, do I have 30 years left? I really hope I have 30 years left, and so for me, it's back to the idea that it's so wildly improbable. What an amazing experience that, the chain of events starting from what we believe was something like a big bang or something could result in us having, the three of us having this conversation.
Yeah.
But suicide is not logical, and you're not, I think almost all cases, it's not this strict logical calculus,
Oh yeah.
And I think, I do believe that in unless I found out evidence otherwise, I'm going to imagine that in every case, it happens because the person just doesn't see any other option.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And in terms of what you were saying, of in the idea of the martyr complex, yeah, that's definitely different from depression. Like I've known people who have had that, and I've stopped being friends with them because of that, because they're like, there's this one girl I used to hang out with, and she had been really good friends with one of my friends for a really long time, and she blamed her and said that she was talking about her behind her back for her not getting my friend's job when she went on maternity leave, even though that's not what happened at all. And if she had really accepted her as a friend fully, that she would know that she would never betray her like that. So I realized, oh, you're the type of person who blames other people for your problems, and you think you're always a victim rather than taking responsibility for your own actions and trying to improve your flaws.
Yeah, I think it's just another variant of narcissism.
And also, what makes humans so complicated is sometimes people have both actual depression and like the bullshit and martyr complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can. One can definitely lead to the other for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, like you were talking about your mom, like it's so important to have these like really anchoring relationships and like a place in a society, because even if that doesn't bring you all of the joy that people like to talk about, like it's still kind of like, it's like a tether, like you're gonna, like, in the back of your mind, you're gonna say, well, they needed me before, like what if something bad happens to them,
Yeah, definitely. Like my mom has a lot of really serious health issues, so I help her out all the time with that because I have to, and she does depend on me for some things in a way. So that is a reason too that I've that's actually one thing that my mom reminds me of all the time, that I'm a useful member of society because I help her out so much, even though, I mean, it doesn't feel like a choice to me, but maybe that's some of what you were talking about earlier, Adam, in terms of like when you develop profound empathy with your family members, it's like when something happens to them, it's like it's as important as it would be.
Andrew?
Yep. Yep. Did we lose you?
I don't know. He looks frozen to me.
He'll come back. Well, he lives where he lives. So,
right.
Let's see if he comes back. I don't know if he's going to have to dial back in or dial back in. Yeah, that's how this works.
Did I cut off for you guys there for a minute?
You did. You froze, and we lost your voice and everything. So
okay, what was, where did it cut off?
You were just saying, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's only about 30 seconds. Yeah, 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was just saying that because I help my mom out so much, it reminded me of what you were saying earlier, Adam, in terms of how when you develop close relationships with your family members or friends, it's like when something happens to them, it's almost the same as if it's happening to you.
Well, and if your experience happens to turn out to be similar to mine in some way in this regard, that only increases over time. And both, I think in a couple ways, both in terms of the number of people for whom in your life for whom that's true, and then kind of the intensity of the feeling, both the joys and the sorrows, you know, and some of this is really, it's you know, supposedly the spiritual ideal is to get to this point of non-duality, right? You know, and I think I've had glimpses of that throughout my life. And I think they do happen more often. And I don't know if some of that is just, again, just proportion and perspective as you age and you just go through more and everything. But yeah, I just can't, you know, the great things that our kids have been able to do and everything. I'm just, I could just go on and on. I'm so happy with the great opportunities that they get and everything. And then when something bad happens for them, yeah, just it crushes me.
Yeah.
But the same thing's true with friends. It's not just family. I mean, it's not just this kind of genetic thing, but it is really about, you know, those stronger relationships that you have.
Yeah. And what you were talking about in terms of your kids there just made me think, like, I think I've talked with both of you about this before, but when I was younger, in my early 20s or something like that, I thought I had this idea that I don't ever want to be in a monogamous relationship, and I don't ever want to have kids or anything like that. But as I get older, I have much more of the mindset now that, like one of the things that my mom has told me many times before, that I'm sure I cannot possibly understand unless I have my own kids, is that if you're in a relationship with someone, like your girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife or whatever, that can be a super strong relationship. But if you have children, apparently that's like an even stronger connection. And the more, like, as I get older, the more I have this idea of, like, I guess maybe partially late, because within the last year or so, part of it is probably because I've been tutoring children too, and that sort of thing. And I just think sometimes, you know, I'm sure it would be a hell of a lot of work, and it's like, in my opinion, the most important job is to, if you have a kid, to teach them how to be a fucking person and how to live. That sounds like the most important and the biggest thing and the biggest challenge possible. But it also sounds like the older I get, the more I think that, you know, it would actually be kind of cool to have a child and teach them about the world and what it is to live and how they can learn about things and develop their own opinions and stuff like that. That actually sounds like not only an extremely challenging experience, but an incredibly rewarding experience.
Well, I'll just say quickly, I can't be objective in this. Please don't listen to me, because I'm as skewed as it can possibly get. I think it's been the greatest adventure of my life, and I'm going to get choked up now. But you know, 3 sons, 1 daughter, and I just it's so nice getting back together with them and everything, and we just have such great conversations, and they're such good people, and they're interesting people, and they're doing good things in the world. And yeah. So I'm going to shut up now, because Andrew knows this because we've gone into it, but you know, there's still a little bit of Elder Hansen left in me, even though I've left that faith. And I can get some kind of evangelistic zeal going sometimes on certain topics.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I always babysat, and like I nannied a lot in grad school, and like I really like little kids. They're really fun, but like they're very exhausting to me at this age.
Yeah.
It's how I feel about dogs. I'm like, they're great. They're super cute. They're awesome, but like I don't want one.
Yeah. Like one of my friends has a toddler, and I was with both of them at I think we went to the pool and to a coffee shop and stuff, and her kid was like running all over the place, and she had to keep chasing her and stuff like that.
Yeah, but then when they like say things, they like realize that we're actually listening and they like kind of understood something and whatever. Like it's pretty like mind blowing. Like how, I mean, yes, their minds aren't developed and they're not that smart right now, but
Yeah.
like glimmers of like, wow, like
No, but it's all about trend, not snapshot, right?
Right,
You know,
yeah.
you get to see that, just even the changes over a couple weeks sometimes, you know, and just to see such kind of stratospheric growth in real time, you know, and to see those gains, it's just, oh yeah. I'll shut up now.
It's like my mom told me about when she was seeing my cousin's kid recently. I think she's 5. She was talking to her, and I forget what exactly the interaction was, but she said, "Oh, that's empathy." And my mom said, "How did you learn that word? How do you know what that means?" And she said, "Oh, I just saw it on a movie or something." She thought that was so incredible that she can understand what that means at 5 years old.
Wow.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There was it's also really funny when they like don't know what things are. Like so they're basically our cousins. They have kids who are like 2 and 4, and the 2-year-old went to, or well, now she's 4, but like she was probably like 2 or 3, and some kid brought in like a hamster or whatever it was, a hamster, guinea pig, I don't know, and she was like talking about it, and she like didn't know what it was. Like she had no concept of like a rodent. You know what I mean? Like for me, it was so funny that like I realized like, oh my gosh, like these aren't. It's good insight into like this isn't all, like you don't always have all of the information in your brain all the time. You had to learn it at some point.
Yeah.
Like you can cut other people slack when you start to realize like I didn't know these things always. Like I didn't always think in these patterns or whatever. But
yeah, I mean I still remember being really dumb. You know?
You start forgetting things. Like I start talking about like computer things, and I like in my brain I really truly believe that everyone can learn to code. But you start to realize like some people do not have the mathematical background to do certain like high level things. Like you have to start from the bottom. You can't just be like jump here. And
you've seen the Dunning-Kruger graph, right? You know,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're on the upward slope on the far side now, well, right?
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, you're climbing up it.
Certain things for sure, yeah.
But yeah, so it's super easy to dismiss all that foundational stuff you did to get there.
Right.
Because mostly what you're looking at is still, your sights are still on, the metaphor I use is that you're in the Himalayas and you've reached the summit of K2, but in this scenario, I don't know if you can actually do this. You can still see the peak of Everest and you realize you're not there. So you're going to discount everything it took to get to the peak of K2.
Right.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, we're just, I'm, as you know, I'm just fascinated with all this stuff. I love how weird we are. I love how reliably weird we are, you know?
Yeah.
I love how reliably weird I am. I mean, it's not, I don't say any of this as a judge, as kind of this outside arbiter or anything. If anything, all my study of behavioral science and everything I think it has made me more humble. Because I'm catching myself more, and I'm going, oh, you were about to do that, you knucklehead.
Adam, do you ever think about like if we ever met aliens, what would they think about the human race, or like how would they start categorizing us, or what would they?
Well, it's kind of the I know there's some name for this or something, but it's this belief that any other life form that we would encounter would by necessity be smarter than us, because otherwise how did we, they came to us. But it could be a really dumb species that just happened to be great at intergalactic. You know, they had kind of this one spike. You know, they're kind of idiot. They're kind of idiot savants for intergalactic travel, and otherwise they're just, you know, dumb as mud. But I think more what I'm intrigued by is how all of us can get that kind of perspective. And for me, it's not, to me, it's encouraging and it's humanizing and it's funny as hell. And it really, to me, it actually warms my heart. I think I feel more compassion for all of us. You know, as I wrote the book, I mean, there's one point where I just thought, holy shit, how do we get anything done? There's nothing there to, you know, understanding all this. There's very little there to predict that we could actually kind of get on any kind of productive path at all. And then that's where I go, well, yay for human spirit then, you know, yay us. You know, there's something there that still wants to pull this all together and be good to each other and create good things and have fantastic conversations with a couple other great people.
Yeah. That reminds me of what you were saying earlier about how fucking amazing it is that any of us are here right now. Like the Big Bang happened, and then through a process of billions of years, the Earth formed. Then there were single-celled organisms, then eventually fish, then eventually the first primates, and then eventually humans, and eventually we developed these societies, and eventually we developed technology, and all of our ancestors were the lucky people who evolved advantages to allow them to survive even during periods of like mass extinction and mass I was just rewatching a new episode of Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson the other day, where he was going through all the mass extinctions that have occurred on Earth and these periods of times where there would be volcanoes erupting for thousands of years and stuff, and humans almost
it could have ended all of it.
Yeah,
it could have. I mean, but for a few things. You know, there's I can't remember who the author is, but this physicist who says it all comes down to 6 basic laws, and the slightest variation in any one of them, and we're not here.
Yep.
You know, and I can then say I can fully buy into that and not need, you know, any kind of supernatural explanation to get me to that. But yeah, it's so wildly improbable, and that's why I think that I mean, when you even take consciousness, when you really think about what consciousness is and how consciousness evolved and how that came to be, it's so crazy.
Yeah,
it's so crazy. And so for me, again, it's this ridiculous, super cheery thing in me. But to me, gratitude is really the only. To me, gratitude is the only reasonable response to the whole damn thing.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a really good place to leave it. I kind of have to go. I'm sorry, guys.
No, that's great.
Okay. Again, the whole thing.
That's great. I do want to say, Andrew, I thank you for hosting and like actually putting out a meeting of the Alex Bello fan club. I think that's really.
I'm the chief member of that.
I think it's been a good thing. Alex and Andrew, both of you, I love the contributions you make online. I find you both just so. I wish I had been as together as you both are when I was your age. So it only gets better. It only gets better from here.
Well, thank you, Adam. It was really good to actually talk to you in person, because I really enjoy like all of your writing, and I loved all of your podcasts, and you seem like you're really like thinking about like cool stuff that, you know, needs to be thought about. So yeah,
that's why I suggested that the three of us talk, because it seemed like you were a big fan of Adam, Alex.
Yeah, big fan. Yes.
Well, it's reciprocal, and I'm a big fan of both of you. And I just love the influence that you both have on a group, not just when it's going sideways, but particularly, I mean, sometimes when that's happening, I see you both come in, and I see both intelligence and emotional intelligence, and which to me kind of starts pulling together this wisdom thing. And I just want to encourage you both, just keep doing that. The world needs just so much more of that. And
high five, Andrew.
yeah,
You did a good job.
Well, thanks a lot, and I appreciate that about both of you too. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Well, thank you guys so much. I hope we talk again soon.
Yeah.
Enjoy Seattle.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just say all the stuff I like to say at the end of my videos, and then you guys can offer any last words or plugs or anything that you want to. All right. So thanks everyone for watching another episode of the Mindgasms podcast. Hope you found this conversation as fascinating as I did, and I think as Adam and Alex did too. And thanks so much to everyone who likes and shares this video, and to those of you who subscribe to my channel, and especially to those of you who contribute to me on Patreon. I really appreciate that, and it helps me out a lot. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all. All right. Keep having mindgasms, everyone. And any last words or plugs there from both of you?
Go out.
No, I don't have too much to plug. Just the Immune Tolerance Network, if you're curious about the immune system, and if you're in the DC area, drink Taiba beer.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the brewery that you're distributing beer from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And back to this idea of increasingly being able to distinguish my own fortunes from those of people I love. I will plug Beth Hansen, my daughter, and her group Late Guest at the Party. They are on Spotify.
You were playing one of her songs the last time we talked, weren't you?
I'm going to do it again.
Okay.
I'll give you a quick snippet. Very short. I think I will. Is this playing? Nah, something happened. I'm sorry. I think my Bluetooth speaker turned off. Anyhow, late guest at the party. It's our lovely daughter Beth and a couple of the Italian cats, and they're based in Brooklyn. And I'm so proud of her, and she's a great person, and I love that she's chasing her dream.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Oh, also in the spirit of that, also check out my brother's band with his friend called Dope Afternoon, who are on SoundCloud and YouTube. I particularly like their song called Let's Have Fun.
Right on.
Cool. Great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks so much for talking. This was a great conversation, and let's do a lot more of them.
Right on. I'd be happy to again. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers. Enjoy Seattle, Alex.
Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right. Adios, everyone.